Hey, what's going on guys? Asher and John here, and today we're going to be going over the PvE god rolls for each of the 6 Vault of Glass weapons, as well as briefly go over my thoughts on Vault of Glass near the end of the video. But before we jump into this, I ask if you want to keep up to date on all Destiny 2 news, information, leaks, tutorials, and more, that you go subscribe to my channel. And before we jump into it, I'd just like to note that I'm not really going to cover barrel perks, because in PvE that's very subjective and it doesn't really matter that much. And in terms of magazine perks, on PvE weapons, you always want to go for the highest magazine size, so stuff like appended mag and extended mag is going to be the best options in that regards. But anyways, jumping into the first weapon here, we're going to talk about Fatebringer, the 140 RPM adaptive frame hand cannon. Now in the first slot here, you definitely got a lot of options like rewind rounds, explosive payload, osmosis, and thresh. But I think the perk that's much better than all of these perks is definitely going to be explosive payload, because this does essentially extend your damage fall off for a hand cannon, and hand cannons do have kind of sucky damage fall off in PvE. On top of this will help with staggering certain enemies, as well as providing a small 5 to 10% damage boost. Then moving over to the right column, the best perks that are worth talking about is Frenzy, Firefly, Kill Clip, and Adrenaline Junkie. Now, Adrenaline Junkie is going to provide the highest damage boost, I'm pretty sure at about 33%. However, that does require 3 grenade kills, and that's a bit difficult to get. With that being said, I think that Firefly is going to be the best here, because not only are you going to get a AoE damage explosion on precision kills that is solar damage, but you're also going to get a reload speed buff equivalent to Outlaw. And obviously the best thing about this is that the Firefly explosion kill is solar damage. That's solar damage on a primary kinetic weapon, which means you will be able to create Warmind cells with the Rafa Rasputin mod. So in my opinion, probably the god roll for this weapon is going to be explosive payload and Firefly, just like it was in D1. Next up for weapons, we have the kinetic sniper, Praedyth Revenge, a rapid-fire 140 RPM sniper. And starting off in the left column here, there's not really anything to talk about than rewind rounds. Rewind rounds is going to be leagues ahead of every single other perk in this column, and simply for the reason that snipers greatly benefit from not having to reload as often, making it hands down the best perk in this column. Then moving on to the right side, there's a couple perks worth talking about, and that's Frenzy, High Impact Reserves, and Adrenaline Junkie. Now again, like I said before, I'm not really the biggest fan of Adrenaline Junkie. Obviously, it's going to give the highest damage boost with 3 grenade kills. However, that's 3 grenade kills, and I highly don't recommend Adrenaline Junkie unless you're able to pull off a really good grenade build. Then next up, we got High Impact Reserves, which does give a sizable damage increase, but the problem is you have to be low on ammo, and even though it works well with rewind rounds, I wouldn't recommend it because something like Frenzy, for example, would be active more than High Impact Reserves. Also on top of this, Frenzy is going to give you a natural reload increase, which is extremely valuable on a sniper. So with that being said, I think rewind rounds and Frenzy is going to be the god roll for Praedyth Revenge. Anyways, moving on to our next weapon, we have the 180 RPM Precision Frame Scout Rifle, Vision of Confluence. Now, hold on. I know it's a 180 RPM Scout, and they aren't exactly the hottest at the moment. However, it does have some above normal perks that do make it stand out as a 180 RPM Scout Rifle. Now, the first 2 perks I want to talk about is Rewind Rounds and Wellspring. Now, obviously, like before, Rewind Rounds, it's okay. It's not the greatest perk in the world. With Vision of Confluence, you generally have about a 16 magazine, which can, I think, max out at 20. Which does make it a solid choice for in-game content, because obviously most in-game content requires you to sit back with a scout rifle, and being able to have a scout rifle that has, you know, like 35 bullets in a single magazine is pretty nutty. However, Wellspring is also another sizable perk to talk about, because it does generate pretty good amounts of ability energy for your abilities. So those are definitely 2 perks to keep an eye out for. With that being said, let's go and move on to the right side of the column. And first up here, let's talk about Firefly. Obviously, it's a great choice, great for ad clear. It's going to give you that high reload, as well as give your Vision of Confluence the ability to create Warmind cells, which is always nice. Then there's Frenzy, which is a good old 15% damage increase just for doing nothing, as well as a reload buff. Nothing too big to talk about there, other than it's just a good damage perk. But yeah, honestly, the god roll for this weapon is either going to be Rewind rounds and Wellspring with either Firefly or Frenzy, and honestly, those 4 perks right there are very good, and it honestly doesn't matter which one you pair them up with. All the combinations end up making fantastic combos. Personally, I think I'm going to go for Wellspring plus Firefly just to get that, ability recharge up, as well as the ability to create Warmind cells is always nice. But as always, god rolls are subjective, and which one you want to go for is up to you. Anyways, moving on to the next weapon, let's go ahead and talk about the aggressive frame shotgun, that being the found verdict. Now, just one thing I'd like to note, there is one particular magazine perk that is better than the rest, particularly on shotguns. Now, it'd be Assault Mag, because it does increase your rate of fire. So for magazine perks, keep an eye out for that one. Now, honestly, when it comes to the left column of this weapon, there's not really a whole lot of good choices, to be honest. I think there's maybe 3 perks that I could recommend, which are okay at best, and that's probably auto-loading holster, surplus, and maybe full auto. Take that full auto one with a grain of salt, because I have not seen full auto on a gun of this nature in a while, and I don't really know how it affects it, if at all. I think personally, for the left column, I think the best perk is probably going to be auto-loading holster for PvE. Then for the right column, there's 3 perks worth talking about, and that's 1-2 punch, frenzy, and vorpal weapon. Now, 1-2 punch is always going to be good on like melee builds, because most of the damage comes from the melee in 1-2 punch. So again, if you got a melee build going on either a Titan or a Hunter, then 1-2 punch is probably going to be the best in the right column. Otherwise, when it comes down to frenzy and vorpal, it's going to be personal preference on this one. Do you want a perk that's active on all enemies as well as give you a reload buff? Or do you want to have a perk that's only good against bosses? I know it's kind of up to you there, but personally, since I recommended auto-loading holster in the left column slot, I think I'm going to have to go with vorpal weapon in the right column, just because you could easily dump off 4 shots into a boss, and then switch to your other weapon to do damage, and then by the time you swap back, you'll be fully reloaded to dump another 4 bullets. Anyways, moving on to the next weapon, let's go ahead and talk about the Adaptive Frame 450 RPM Light Machine Gun, the Corrective Measure. Now, starting off with the left column, you got a ton of options. First perk I'd recommend is Rewind rounds. Obviously, this weapon is a machine gun. It's meant for ad clear. As well as soon, when it gets its damage buff, it should be pretty decent against bosses as well. And obviously, having Rewind rounds will allow you to have that better sustained DPS, as well as more ad clear. Then you also got Subsistence, which recently got the ammo penalty removed, making it a fantastic perk. And with this being a machine gun, it's really good for ad clear. So Subsistence again would allow you to ad clear longer. Then next up you got Demolitionist, which will give you more grenade energy upon kills, as well as throwing a grenade will reload for you. And as always, you got the classic Feeding Frenzy, which is fantastic for a machine gun, because again, machine guns are really good for ad clear, and you'll obviously be able to proc it extremely easily. Then moving on to the right column, we got One for All, the classic really high, super easy to proc damage buff. All you gotta do is hit 3 targets and you can get a 33% damage buff, which is insane. Then you got Firefly, which will allow you to create Warmind cells, as well as give you a super high reload speed and AoE damage. Perfect for an ad clear weapon like this. And then you got my least favorite damage buff, that being Adrenaline Junkie, which requires you again to get 3 grenade kills and you get a 33% damage buff. Not my most favorite, however, it is a good combination with Demolitionist. At the end of the day, I think the god roll is going to be either Feeding Frenzy, Rewind rounds, or Subsistence combined with either One for All or Firefly. And if you're that type of person, Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie is also a good combination as well. Anyways, moving on to our final weapon, we got the Aggressive Frame Rocket Launcher, the Hezen Vengeance. Starting off with the left column here, here. First up, we got auto-loading holster, which is going to be great for boss DPS in combination with something like a Vorpal weapon or lasting impression. Then we also have impulse amplifier, which is going to massively increase your reload speed, another great boss DPS perk. And then lastly, we have something that I'm pretty sure is brand new to rocket launchers, and that is overflow, which is going to increase your magazine to 2, which will greatly increase your DPS on a single rocket. Then moving on to the right column, we got Vorpal weapon, lasting impression, and cluster bombs. And honestly, you can combine any of the perks I mentioned. They're all fantastic for boss DPS. However, I think you're going to consistently get the highest DPS when combining it with auto-loading holster and Vorpal weapon, because that will allow you to switch off to some other weapon like Izanagi's Burden, for example, to obtain some pretty high DPS. Again, any of the perks in any combination I mentioned here do work out pretty well as a god roll. But like I said earlier, god rolls are subjective, and so let me know some of your god rolls that you have for some of these weapons in the comments down below. Like I mentioned earlier, we're gonna have a brief review of Vault of Glass here, and I just want to say Bungie did a fantastic job with it. Even though I wasn't able to fully participate in the raid race to the fullest extent I wanted to due to me being ill with the second COVID shot, I definitely feel like the difficulty was nailed straight on the head in regards to Tempo's Edge. Definitely a good way to balance out a reprised raid. However, I do have a couple things that are big stinkers with this raid that I'm not really a fan of. First up is not bringing back all the raid loot. That's kind of yikes with me, Chief. However, I think I can let this one kind of slide because they did bring back all the weapons with some sort of meta potential. Also, I'm not going to talk about Age of Triumph ornaments because I'd like those back. However, at the moment, we don't know if we are going to get those back. There is some hints in the database that we may be getting them for Master Mode maybe. However, that's not confirmed at all. And if they do end up not coming back, that's another +1 to the yikes counter. Another thing I'm not really a fan of is the fact that Eververse having some cosmetics tied to it that probably should have been rewards in the raid, but that's a topic for another video. And the last thing is the Fatebringer seal, aka the title seal for Vault of Glass, does not require the flawless completion of the raid, which is, in my opinion, makes the title way too easy to get. But yeah, other than those couple things, I'm pretty satisfied with Vault of Glass's reintroduction into Destiny 2, and I think they did an absolutely banger job with it. And I hope we see more reprise raids that have this level of care and detail into it going into the future. Anyways, this was Acer and John. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts on Vault of Glass, as well as your god rolls for the Vault of Glass weapons in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to keep up to date on Destiny news or other reviews like this, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.